The House will please come to order. Welcome members to the 11th day of the 66th Wyoming Legislature's budget session, Monday, February 28th. We are pleased to have the Reverend Mark Marston here from First United Methodist Church. Please join the Reverend as we open in prayer.
Pray. Our Lord in heaven, you who put the stars in the sky, you who placed the sun in the heavens, you who made all things seen and unseen, guide us on this day, that even though we live in a world of uncertain times and chaos, of tangles of fears that beguile us, our Lord, we know that you are in charge of all things. You still sit on your throne. Our Lord, we ask that you might give us patience and wisdom and guide us in these uncertain times. For these things we pray through Jesus Christ. Amen and amen.
Thank you, Reverend. We look forward to the rest of the week with you. Thank you very much. All right, roll call.
Convening roll for the 11th day, Monday, February 28th, 2022. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn, excused. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. 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 Greer. Hallinan.
Here.
Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Excused. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Swanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 58 present, 2 excused.
Thank you very much. So we're going to need a couple updates. So Representative Baker, you need to queue yourself up. We'll start with Representative Crago, though. He has the privilege of the floor, and then I'll follow that up. And any other announcements, privileges, or anything like that, let's get them knocked out. Representative Crago.
Privilege of the floor, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to invite you all to help me welcome the Clover Colt 4-H Club from my home county, Johnson County. If y'all would stand up, please.
That's some good stuff right there. The future of Wyoming right up there. And those young people, I want you to look over at that gallery over there, because this is the Wyoming State 4-H leadership team for this year. So if they would stand up, let's welcome them to the house. So there we are, half a generation right there represented between the two groups. Good stuff for Wyoming. Good things there. All right, Representative Baker, if you'd like to give us an update on your family, we'd sure love to hear about it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Please proceed.
Thank you. As the body is aware, I became a grandpa Friday morning, and he was born. His name is Bexley Gray Baker, and he was born at 3 pounds and 1 ounce, and just about 16 inches. He was born, he was teeny. He still is teeny. I haven't actually seen him yet. So he's already grown an inch. He was born at 30 weeks, so 10 weeks premature. They don't really know why, other than the fact that his mother is small and younger. They're both teenagers, so they've got a lot ahead of them, but thank goodness they have a lot of support. So, but obviously, Bexley, we could feel the prayers, not only from this body, but family and friends from throughout the country, and it was nice, and we continue to ask for your prayers. He obviously is. They expect him to be down in Utah at least through the time that his expected due date, so probably another 10 weeks or so. So both my son and his girlfriend are going to move to online learning, and they're going to be down there in Utah. So his girlfriend's family and that are going to get a B&B and be down there close, or his mother and that. And then my mom actually lives in Far West, which if you're familiar, it's just outside of Ogden. And I have family in Kaysville, so he's actually going to be staying with family in Kaysville, so about 20 miles from the hospital. So, but anyway, it's great to be back, and obviously I look forward to seeing him. We went down there to Utah, but because of the policy, obviously they only let 2 people in. So it was my son and the mother. Her name is Aubrey, and so Tim and Aubrey are allowed in, and then both of their mothers were allowed in. So they each got a visitor because they're minors, but normally it would just be the 2 of them if they were adults. So they each got a visitor. So I'm looking forward to seeing my grandkid, but obviously I have pictures, but he's connected to tubes, and he has a feeding tube, and initially he had a breathing tube, but now he just has the oxygen. So, but he does have a feeding tube, and but obviously growing and things are looking up, and it's great to be back, and it's great to have the support of everybody here. So I apologize if I didn't reach back out to you, because I did receive a lot of support and a lot of contact from the body. But thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's great to be back. Thank you for the time and the opportunity.
Thank you for that update. Continued thoughts and prayers. As you saw, we're pleased to have Representative Obermueller back joining us in person. Glad he's here. Representative Blackburn, I spoke to him yesterday. He is recovering, but now he has a couple other family members that are ill. So I think he was being cared for last week, and now he's the caregiver this week. So he may join us remotely. And then Dr. Hallinan told me yesterday that he is improving, but we're going to keep him at a safe distance a day or 2 more. So great to see you, Doc. I don't know that he sounded any better when I spoke to him yesterday, but he said he felt much better. So anyway, Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 25th, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Haroldson and Provenza.
I don't see our doctor of the day, but when he does arrive, we'll get him introduced. Madam Minority Floor Leader, I think you have a guest here today. Would you introduce your guest?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege.
Please proceed.
Okay. Friends, I'd like to introduce our page of the week. This is Sophia Gomelski. She is a junior at Laramie High School, where she's involved in theater, debate, and the business club DECA. Outside of school, she likes to hike and play with her dog Percy. Post-high school graduation, she plans on going to UW for degrees in political science and then law school, and then run for my seat. So please join me in welcoming her.
Well, welcome to the House. Theater, debate, and poli-science. You're going to witness all of that here this week. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're here. All right, any other messages, any other announcements? We have messages from the Senate.
Message 152, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 1, General Government Appropriations. Ayes 24, noes 4, excused 2. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
That's it? Okay. So members, we're going to do some Senate files on first reading. And there's going to be some bills that maybe typically go to one committee that are, and then subsequently get referred to our Appropriations Committee. And because of the work we have coming with the ARPA bill, CAPCON bill, and some of those, I'm trying to get some of those moved a little quicker in the process. So some of these bills are going to go directly to Appropriations to be heard there as their initial committee and come back for it. It's no slight on the other committees that may typically get those bills. It's about trying to keep the workflow going. Because as we get toward later in the week, those committees are going to potentially be in conference committee on the budget, some of those members, et cetera. So I'm just trying to keep things flowing so we can keep in sync with our colleagues at the underneath other end of the hall. So with that, we're on reading and introduction of Senate files. The first Senate file for our consideration is 48. Reading clerk.
Senate File 48, sponsored by Natural Resource Finding.
First reading of the bill.
2022 Large Project Funding.
Senate File 48 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Next Senate File is 68.
Senate File 68, sponsored by Blockchain.
First reading of the bill.
Decentralized Autonomous Organizations Amendments.
Senate File 68 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Next Senate File 102.
Senate File 102, sponsored by Senator Hicks.
First reading of the bill.
Second Amendment Protection Act.
Senate File 102 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Next Senate File 112.
Senate File 112, sponsored by Senate Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
General Government Reports 2.
Senate File 112 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Next Senate File 7.
Senate File 7, sponsored by Travel.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Gaming Commission, Shriver Error Correction.
Scrivener error.
Scrivener error correction.
error. Thank you. Senate File 7 is referred to Committee Number 6, Travel. Next Senate File 61.
Senate File 61, sponsored by Senator Perkins.
First reading of the bill.
Sage Grouse Game Bird Farms, no certification expiration 2.
Senate File 61 is referred to Committee Number 6, Travel. Next Senate File 12.
Senate File 12, sponsored by Senator Anderson.
First reading of the bill.
Airport Restaurant Liquor Licenses.
Senate File 12 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next Senate File 53.
Senate File 53, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
First reading of the bill.
Local Government Liability Pool Amendments.
Senate File 53 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Reports from standing committees.
Senate File 67, sponsored by Appropriations. State-funded capital construction. An act related to state-funded capital construction. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 67 engrossed, state-funded capital construction, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
All right, members, with that order of bills on second reading. Second reading. And I know some folks have told me they've requested amendments. Those amendments may not be available yet. if you have requested amendment and your bill is up on second reading and it's not out by the time we get to your bill, we'll just roll it to the bottom of the list. If it's still not out and you'd like, we'll just lay it back an additional day and we'll take it up on second reading tomorrow. So you'll have that choice when we get there. So if there's a bill that there is not, you have an amendment requested that is not up yet, if you have an amendment that's not been approved, let either the majority floor leader or myself know, or the chief clerk, so we can roll it down the list. So once we read it in, then we've got to take it up, and then you'll only have third reading. So I see the first bill, there's an amendment being prepared, so 27 will be rolled down the list. Right, so members, just like I had to do about 10 minutes ago, if you've requested amendments to any of these bills, to any bills, please check your email, because that's how they're getting approval. So check your email to make sure if you've received the email, they're trying to turn them around as fast as they can. Check your email and approve it if it's ready to go. If it's not ready to go, then let us know and we'll roll it down a day, or you can bring your amendment on third reading for the second reading amendment bills. So with that, second reading bills, the first bill for our consideration is House Bill 44.
House Bill 44, sponsored by Representative Newsom. Mobile home and vehicle titles and transfers, an act relating to motor vehicles.
House Bill 44 have been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 56.
House Bill 56, sponsored by Management Audit, examination of books of certain districts and entities, an act relating to the Department of Audit, examination of books of special districts and certain specified entities.
There is an amendment. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 56. Ask for your favorable consideration. After we worked this bill in committee, we noticed there was a small drafting error, and the association that deals with our municipalities went through the statutes and corrected the language. And so I think this is just a cleanup amendment about when we say other entities in the statute. There's two types of other entities we're talking about: those that have municipal funding and the municipalities oversee, that are special, kind of, that were not quite special districts, but they're municipality-created entities, and then we have otherwise special districts. So really just a cleanup brought to you by the association that deals with our cities to specify who has authority over which areas. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, members on second reading. Any member for their first time? Member for their first time? First time, second time, seeing no one. Members, we're voting on second reading. Amendment number 1, House Bill 56. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. House Bill 56, having read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill, 64.
House Bill 64, sponsored by Representative Brown, vehicle service contracts, an act relating to the insurance code.
House Bill 64, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill, 71.
House Bill 71, sponsored by Representative Crago, driving while license suspended, enhancement amendment, an act relating to driver's licenses.
House Bill 71, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill, 72.
House Bill 72, sponsored by Representative Summers, hunting license application funds, an act relating to game and fish.
House Bill 72, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 83.
House Bill 83, sponsored by Representative Stith, protection of parental rights application, an act relating to parental rights.
We do have an amendment. Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 83, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Friends, if you remember, we had a pretty vigorous debate about this, and the reality that something that is in Title 14 is now going into Title 20. And what I wanted to make sure of with my amendment is that the two kind of very significant issues that we are concerned about, one being parental rights and the other being how children are taken care of when they need to be in the system, are now put together in the Title 14 statute, which is going into Title 20. So if you remember, what we're saying now with the bill is that, which is in Title 14, which is under children and parents, that we want to make sure that there's a fundamental right for parents to care for their children. Title 20 is about kind of domestic relations when there's child custody disputes. So where in all honesty, you're going to have one parent against another. So what this amendment simply does is it says that nothing in this section supersedes the best interest of the child standard as enumerated in that Title 20. And with that, I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Representative Stith for your first time on the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the representative from District 13 for the good intentions behind this, and also for giving me fair warning of this amendment. I think one thing that I think we've done a good job of is be very civilized here in our debate. Please vote no on this, and here's why. The amendment, I think, causes confusion about what the whole bill would mean, because the point of the bill is to say that when you are evaluating the best interests of the child, and you're doing so in a way that would restrict the liberty interest of the parent to the care, custody, and control of the child, you've got to do so in the least restrictive way. That's what the bill does. So the bill already acknowledges the compelling state interest that is the best interest of the child. What the amendment would do would frankly create some confusion about what the whole bill means, because it would make it sound like the best interests of the child would be the only factor you would consider. And the United States Supreme Court has said that although, yeah, best interest of the child is something we care a lot about, that is a compelling state interest, it can't be the only thing the court thinks about. Because if the best interest, to use an example, if the best interest of the child were the only thing that the court would care about, what courts could do when parents split up is the court could say, hey, we have two poor parents, neither one of them are very good parents, but we have a grandparent who is wealthy and a good grandparent, so let's just take the child away from the parents and give it to the grandparent, because that, in many cases, would be better for the child, right? Better to grow up rich than to grow up poor, right? And the Supreme Court says, no, you can't just say it's better to grow up rich than to grow up poor. You can't just say what's in the best interest of the child. You have to balance that with the fundamental liberty interest of the parent. So I think this amendment, well-intentioned, confuses the issue and makes it sound like best interest of the child is the only thing the court should consider. So to keep the bill clean, please vote no.
Any other member first time? Representative Jennings, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I, too, would urge a no vote. This has been an ongoing battle for a number of years, and it's a balancing act of figuring out, what are the fundamental rights of a parent. And we know that by the time it goes to court that there are issues and problems, and the court gets to sort that out. But to put the government in the first place is a very dangerous thing to do. So I would vote no on this.
Chairman Zwanitzer, first time on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And actually, I'm in favor of the amendment. When you look in 22-201, the best interest of the child statutes, actually it has 9 different subsets, and every single one of them in the best interest of the child is actually really based on the parent. Now, you can look at all 9 subsections, and each one talks about the parent. The first is the quality of the relationship between the child and the parent. The second is the ability of each parent to provide adequate care, the relative competency of each parent's willingness to accept responsibility, how the parent and child can maintain and strengthen that relationship. And so they're not really separate things, at least in my mind. All of the things in best interest of the child in our statutes deal with the relationship with the parent and that child, and really, who the best parent is for that child. So I don't think it hurts the bill to say, hey, we have an order of operations, because ultimately, each person in our society has rights, and we need to be thinking about what's in the best interest of the kid in question and vis-a-vis the responsibilities that each parent would have to that child. And again, this is in Title 20, and it deals with domestic relations, which is a lot messier than juvenile relations in Title 14. So I don't think it hurts the bill. It may clarify it some, but I think the court would probably do this anyway, but to spell it out in statute. And the bill is already kind of an interesting, is it completely needed to clarify the statute? Well, we need to kind of put a clarification in a certain order of how a court would deal with each one of these situations vis-a-vis the new statutes and existing statutes. I don't think it hurts at all to have an order of operations, as I would call it.
Thank you. Any other member first time? Well, first time on the amendment. First time, second time. Second time to the sponsor. Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So let's go back to the bill itself. The bill itself is just in Title 14. All right, the bill itself is just in Title 14. The bill itself actually modifies our statute, which is in Title 14, to bring in Title 20 in ways that it hadn't been brought in before. So the bill itself says that this section, which is just about that fundamental parental right, shall apply in any judicial or non-judicial determination or adjudication regarding parental rights involving parentage, neglect, termination of parental rights, child custody and visitation under this title, Title 14, or Title 20. All right, so for the first time, it's bringing in Title 20, which is domestic relations. Okay, so now we have kind of this articulation of the fundamental right of parents to raise their children going into Title 20, okay, where it hadn't before, right? What this amendment does is say, pay attention to Title 20. If you're going to go into Title 20, let's be sure that the standard that is out there, which is the best interest of the child, is now taken care of in Title 14 as well. Right? We have to do both. We have to do both, right? Because again, I mean, just the simple example is about a fundamental right of parents to parent in a child custody dispute. When you go into Title 20, right, which now we're doing, right? It's one parent against another. There's no fundamental right of one parent over the other. They both have to be equal, right? We all agree with that. So now we actually need to include in Title 14 a reference to that standard, which is in Title 20, or there's where you have confusion, right? Without this, honestly, there is massive confusion. So on and in favor.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on second reading Amendment Number 1, House Bill 83. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is not adopted. House Bill 83, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next, House Bill 85.
House Bill 85, sponsored by Representative Oakley. Child endangering, controlled substance use while pregnant, an act relating to crimes and offenses.
We have an amendment. Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 85 and ask for your favorable consideration. So, members, I mentioned this amendment when I presented the bill and bring it to you now. So, some of the criticism that we heard of the bill said that it appeared only to be punitive to the mother by bringing this, and that it sought punishment for addiction and did not focus enough on the care and support. So what we're bringing here, this amendment mandates that upon a first offense, the court shall order probation and have a woman get treatment. This is not done in any other offense in our statutes. So this would be groundbreaking. But hearing the concerns and in trying to find the balance, we crafted this amendment. So with this amendment, we can strike that balance of concerns about ensuring that the woman has meaningful access to resources and treatment, and also ensuring the safety and the care of the child with that compliance piece that this legislation provides overall. So bringing in the amendment, trying to find a balance, and I would say also can't say that, that the only focus is incarceration if this amendment is in place, because again, it would actually mandate that the court offer and order probation first. So with that, I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Representative Washut, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question on the 301 provision in this amendment. Normally, a Section 301 deferred prosecution is solely in the discretion of the prosecutor. And I just want to make sure that the language in this amendment doesn't take that discretion away from our prosecutor.
Thank you. Representative Provenza, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was mentioned that this is unprecedented in our other statutes, so I'm wondering what this does for judges. Do we have in other parts of our statute that these other implications, I guess? And I mean, my points that I made last week are still relevant here because, again, women in these situations don't know what the statutes are. All they know is that it's legal or not, that they could be sought after for punitive measure in the justice system. It is not fixing any of the concerns that other states are seeing, which is the higher rate of babies born with withdrawal symptoms. So it's still a bar between the woman and her physician. And so I think while I can appreciate the sentiment of this, I stand by what I said last week, which is that the solution, the fix for this, the thing that's going to help mothers and help babies in these situations is in healthcare statutes, is in making sure that we have programs for them, not any form of punitive measures. This still has the same impact that it has before in terms of helping women stop substance abuse or seek treatment. So thank you. On and against the amendment.
Thank you. Chairman Zwanis, sir, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question. When this gets charged, I would assume that you would likely have multiple charges, right? You might have a charge for misdemeanor use of methamphetamine, a couple of other things. How does that interrelate in the law? Would the court under this section say everything else is negated because we're going to allow this treatment option, or the prosecutor then get to decide, if they even wanted to charge them under child endangerment, if they just wanted to charge them under a straight methamphetamine case? What happens when you have multiple charges? Is it just prosecutorial discretion or is it judicial discretion? And I just need someone to walk me through how that would work in a situation that had multiple charges against it.
Thank you very much. Representative Wharf, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have to apologize to the body. I was late, and I really need more time to digest this. I appreciate the bringer of the amendment. I think it's a step in the right direction. I still want to look at it. I'm concerned still the message that we're sending, and I worry that the good intentions may have bad results. I think this may help it. I appreciate the amendment, and I guess I'm still kind of hung up on the fence. So with that, I appreciate the bringer of the amendment.
Thank you. Any other members? First time, first time. Representative Craigo, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First for a second.
Any other member? First time, first time, first time, second time, second time, second time, second time to the sponsor, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, so to address several questions, discussions. So starting with how this relates to a 301, I do not believe this changes anything because of two things in the amendment and how it's written. I would agree that we do not want to take it. It is a discretionary tool, but it says notwithstanding any other provision of the law. So the 301 statute discusses that, first it's offered by a prosecutor and then accepted by the judge. And then finally you go down, it says the court may enter a deferred sentence under 301. So both of them are permissive, as the 301 statute is. Something I neglected to mention, as proposed here, as written, I included a deferral under 35-7-1037. This is also unique and different as far as having two different avenues of deferral, which doesn't exist in any other statute. Again, trying to give those options in the appropriate case. So I think everything is in line there. As far as there was, there was a question about, since it's not any other place in the law, how that affects judges. Well, what this does is it takes that discretion away. So it isn't up to the judge to say, the way this is written, what this would do would mandate probation first, initially order probation, rather than, so there's no opportunity under a first offense for them to be sentenced to a term of incarceration without the opportunity for treatment and probation. As it relates to multiple charges, what this is in relation to the sentencing provision for this charge only. So this subsection C, this newly created subsection C of child endangering when a woman ingests methamphetamine. So this sentencing provision only applies to that. So no, it wouldn't apply, let's say, if what was chosen to be charged was use of methamphetamine, then the sentencing provisions of use of methamphetamine would be in place, or like the use of a drug is a misdemeanor. So then that would proceed like it already does in our law. As far as multiple charges, so that it is certainly possible it happens. So let's say they was charged under subsection C here, and they did a deferral, but originally also charged a use. They could be sentenced under both. That's just how the criminal justice system works, and this doesn't change anything regarding that. The last two, I'm a little confused about the argument that since women don't know what statutes are, because the entire argument used to be based that if we make this a felony, women do know what the statutes are, and that would cause them not to seek care. So I'm not sure where that was going. I don't see any change here. But again, it was directly responsive to, this change is directly responsive to those criticisms. And finally, the last one was, I don't know what message this sends, but again, it is a policy, but overall, the message is an important one. And that is, we will seek compliance if you are undertaking, if you're abusing methamphetamine while you're pregnant, because the consequences are catastrophic to the children, to our society. There are options available, and we will offer those, but the message is an important one, that this should be prohibited behavior in our law. So with that, I think this addresses most of the criticisms. I think it is more than fair to an addicted woman while taking care of societal ills. And with that, I would urge your favorable consideration on this amendment.
Thank you. So members, we're voting on second reading, amendment number 1, House Bill 85. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. House Bill 85 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, House Bill 91.
House Bill 91, sponsored by Representative Greer. County officers, salaries, and act relating to counties.
We do have an amendment. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 91 and ask for your favorable introduction. And this goes back to kind of the complaint I've had for a very long time now in this body, where our county officers can make more than our statewide officers, right? So we have, I looked again, 23 county offices making more than our current statewide electeds, 4 of our 5 statewide electeds. And so really, I went back into the 80s, and it looks like we've had a differentiation between our chief executive and our other 4 statewide officers. There's always been that difference. And so if you look at the bill coming up later on, which increases that salary, our other state officers in that bill are currently at $120,000 a year. The bill before us, with the amendment that put circuit court judge, it's at $145,000. And so we would still have this issue where we could have a county clerk making $20,000 to $25,000 more a year than our Secretary of State, or a county treasurer making more than our state treasurer. And I'm certainly okay with them being in line with one another, because I understand there are differences statewide on the expense of where you live. But I just think it's inappropriate for any countywide officer to make more than one of our statewide electeds. And so what I did is change from a circuit court judge to the Secretary of State, in line with that salary. So in the other bill right now, that's 120. If at some point in the future that gets raised, then all county officer salaries could get raised. I think it's better to have that tie-in and have a completely separate pay grade and scale for county officers versus our state elected officials. So just trying to set that upper limit to be no higher, it could be equal to, but no higher than what one of our statewide officers make. Certainly appreciate your aye vote.
Thank you. Any members first time on the amendment? First time on the amendment? Chairman Greer, first time on the amendment, number 2.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So
One.
when I brought this bill forward, I kind of left that to this body to decide what you felt was appropriate for that upper level. I mean, if that amounts the amount you want, that's fine with me. I guess I would prefer, though, that we have it tied as we did with the circuit or the district courts, because we do periodically get pushed by the judiciary to look at those salaries. We get, and they have a tendency to update them more often. When we see any attempt to raise the statewide elected salaries, we see a great deal of resistance. So that's just one policy consideration to think about. I also, what's fair in compensation is in the eyes of the beholder. I still look at this bill as being an issue of providing the counties with the local control regarding what's right for the people that they need to have to perform the duties within the counties. And that varies from county to county. Some counties are much more expensive to live in and need to have more flexibility. So, I'm going to vote no on the amendment, but it doesn't offend me in any way, shape, or form. I felt it was for this body to decide what that upper cap is. I just wanted to make sure we had the discussion and recognize that our county commissioners should have that discretion to the extent we can give it to them to help establish the necessary salaries within their own jurisdictions.
Any other member first time? First time, Representative Oakley, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would urge an aye vote and just reiterate that this is what our counties are asking for us so that they can have local control and set the appropriate amounts. And just some pushback on, that we just have to have this sort of legislative control on it. The Wyoming Constitution, Article 14, Section 1 says, the legislature shall from time to time fix the amount of such salaries, which shall in all cases be in proportion to the value of the services rendered and the duty performed. And we have heard from associations that our county attorneys are significantly under the services rendered and the duty performed, and the counties are ready to fix that. And the idea that we arbitrarily are keeping them below that doesn't seem fair or make sense to me. And then, and we know specifically that they are not valued correctly when several of these counties have told us the deputies are making up to 40% more than the county attorney. Let the counties make their choices so they can do their business and run their counties.
Thank you very much, Representative Stith, first time on the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, on and for the amendment, but my real purpose here is to eat a little bit of crow. A few days ago, last week, the representative from District 36 pointed out that the Constitution had been amended since the Supreme Court last issued its decision in 1942 about
it being acceptable to specify a maximum as satisfying our constitutional requirement to set the salaries. And I came to the microphone and said I didn't think the Constitution had been amended. Turns out in 1943, as the district representative from District 36 said, the Constitution was amended. It's Article 14, Section 3. But that's where the story sort of ends. So I just wanted to, the Constitution was amended, but it's just really unclear whether that amendment makes any difference. And our highest court addressed this amendment, 1943 amendment, addressed it in a 1998 opinion in a footnote, but didn't really explain it. And so it's kind of an open question still. So this is all just to say to apologize for pretending to know things I don't, and I don't know, but on and for.
That's the first time in 10 years I've heard that comment. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Nicholas, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, the only problem with this amendment, or the primary problem, is if the bill raising the salaries of the 5 electeds does not pass, then this guy actually goes in the other direction. So you've got to, they've got to go hand in hand, or you've got to vote this particular amendment down.
Thank you. Any other members first time? Any other members first time? First time? First time. Second time? Second time. Representative Oakley, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Somebody said that I might have incorrectly stated my position. I think it's clear, but no on the amendment, yes on the bill.
Thank you. Any other member for their second time? Second time to the sponsor, Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so a couple comments in response. To the last speaker, if you look at this legislation, county attorneys are separate. We have a different bill for their salaries. This would only go to part-time county attorneys if you look at the language. So we've actually taken county attorneys, put them in a whole different bill at a different level. So nothing in this pay bill affects a full-time county attorney, just a part-time county attorney. And so, I mean, I guess it's a philosophical discussion. If you want to tie county elected executive branch officers to the statewide judicial circuit court, or if you would rather tie a county level executive to a state level executive, I think that's more appropriate personally. Right now, it's $145,000 a year for a circuit court, and that just seems a little bit high to me, honestly, right? To have a county clerk or a county assessor or a part-time county attorney making $145,000 a year. I think that's just too big of a jump too quick for my level of comfort. Perhaps a jump right now from, I think it's just under 100 to 120 seems a little more rational and reasonable. That's still a 20% jump in a year, which I know it's been 15 years since we raised them, but I do think it's probably more important for this body as a legislature to say an executive branch state level salary should be in line with an executive branch county level salary. The other bill that the Good Chairman of Appropriations talked about for those statewide salaries, that's up on third reading today. And so if something does happen to that today, I will be back here tomorrow if this amendment passes, probably either way, and fix that accordingly if we have to go back. But I think at least today, if we think the other statewide official salary bill will pass, then this is a company bill to say that a county-wide officer can't make more than a statewide elected, besides that county attorney position, which is in a separate bill that we've had more debate on. But again, this is your clerk, your assessor, your part-time county attorney, your clerk at district court, right? I'm just not ready to say we need to have a pay band that goes up to $145,000 a year for those positions quite yet in Wyoming.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on second reading, Amendment number 1, House Bill 91. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No. The amendment is not adopted. House Bill 91, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next, House Bill 92.
House Bill 92, sponsored by Representative Rodriguez Williams. Abortion prohibition, Supreme Court decision, an act relating to abortion.
We do have an amendment. Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 92, and I ask for your favorable considerations. Members, I think the chamber spoke very loudly on committee of the whole. However, I wanted to give you all the chance to make the nuance on the policy decision. So this amendment basically sets the line at rape and incest. So the question before you is whether you want to force a woman who had, by no choice of their own, been impregnated, whether you want, as the state, to force them to bring that baby to term. That's simply all it is. It's, do we as a state tell women who have been raped that they need to continue having that pregnancy? Yes or no? And I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, members. First time, we'll go with Representative Washut and then Representative LeBeau.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess my question is, how do we establish that the pregnancy is the result of a rape? Is it simply the mother's statement? Is there a burden of proof? Does it have to be reported and investigated by law enforcement? Otherwise, you know, I guess I'm not sure how we establish whether a pregnancy is a result of rape or not. So I'd like some comment.
Thank you, Representative LeBeau. First time on the amendment.
Those histeja na sitno itati nakusich. Hinani e nina. So good morning, body. I'm an Arapaho woman, and I am a sponsor of this amendment. I sit on the Labor Health Committee, and there was testimony. And I had trouble with the testimony, and particularly I have trouble with this bill. And I know it's probably gonna move forward. But I stand on this amendment to try to make it better. We have state statutes. Title VI, criminal offenses. Chapter 4, offenses against the family. And so what this amendment does is highlights those crimes of rape and incest. It is a felony punishable up to not more than 15 years and a fine of not more than 10,000 or both. And so if a person in Wyoming is convicted of those crimes, I would say, my good colleague from the middle of the state, there's your answer. And why we would want to put this amendment on. And so I just urge the body to please support this amendment. We're going to have the government in the room with the doctor and the patient. I think this is a solution to help with this problem and make it better. Mental health is important for women, and if we don't do this, it just shows a deep ignorance for the health and well-being of the mother. And the health and well-being of a mother is in utero, the uterus. What happens to the mother if there's a traumatic experience, it still can affect the baby, the fetus, and this is what we're talking about. And we would want the woman to get help. We would want the woman to have access to services while she is going to carry this baby going forward, if that should be the case. But again, I'm going to tell you this amendment is rape or incest, and we have that in statute. So I'd urge the body to please support this amendment. Ho, thank you.
Thank you. Any of the members, first time? Representative Rodriguez-Williams, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to urge a no vote on this amendment. I thank my colleagues for bringing up the concern of women that have been victims of rape or incest. But the reality is that two wrongs don't make a right. Abortion is not health care, and abortion is murder. I'm going to tell you why I'm pro-life in all cases, even rape, even incest, even in the hardest and most difficult scenarios. And I can explain why. My view of humanity is inclusive, indeed wide open, and I'm very culturally competent. Life is sacred. Babies in the womb are innocent. Babies in the womb are living human beings. Non-living things cannot develop into living things. Unborn children are alive because born people are alive. And no living thing could have ever been a non-living thing. If something is alive, then it must be part of some species or another. There can be nothing that is alive, but not of a species. If unborn children are not human, then they would be of another species, which is to suggest that through the course of your existence, you switch from one species to a different one. And that, of course, is absurd and impossible. I urge a no vote on the amendment.
Thank you. Any other members first time on the second reading amendment? First time, second reading amendment, first time. Representative Ottman, first time. Any other members want to speak to these amendments, please step up to the microphone. First time, Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is such a emotional and heavy decision that we're here to make. What we have to think about is when we're deciding that a crime is to be covered. The incidents of rape and incest are horrific. They are becoming more and more common in our society. Women and children and families are being just so divided and destroyed by these actions. There is law against that, and they need to be reported. Giving women who have been so emotionally and traumatically devastated and hurt this option, you must do this when they are going through things that emotionally they will be affected for months and months and sometimes years ahead. To say, make that decision now to get rid of this thing that you may hate is not a good thing. In the 70s, abortion was put in because we couldn't prove that it was life, or the court decided that. We now know, and from testimony we had this morning and praise on a little guy, 3.5 pounds being born, we know that that is life, that is a person, no matter how they were conceived. This is a very, very important vote, and I would encourage you, as there, our society, being on the committee I'm on, I also know that the response to abortion is very, let me see, women are coming out and saying, with the promiscuity and addictions, women are asking for help for post-abortion. It is a real thing, and it's something that they have to live with. And I would just ask that you vote no on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the members first time, second time, Representative LeBeau.
Body, I urge an aye of you supporting this amendment. I agree. The fetus is living. I agree. But we have statutes for rape and incest on the books. That's our statutes. That's what we have. And yes, the uterus is a living person. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But so are your daughters, your granddaughters, your great-granddaughters, and your nieces. And me standing here before you, I'm a living being too. I want my wellness and my being to be protected as well. If a crime's against me, against women in this state, then they should be held accountable. So I urge your vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the members second time. To the sponsor, Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on the question of who judges, it would be a judge. I mean, frankly, it's a crime, as the good previous speaker said. It would be decided in court, and that's how you would know whether it is incest or rape. I think that again, this is just a policy question. Can you justify to your constituents where the line is? Is the line whether a woman is raped and impregnated without her consent, whether the state is required to force her to bring that pregnancy to term? That's the choice that you'll have to make internally and the choice that you'll have to make to your constituents. I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on second reading, Amendment Number 1, House Bill 92. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is not adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, please rise and stay still. The amendment is not adopted. 2434. House Bill 92 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next, House Bill 96.
House Bill 96, sponsored by Representative Nicholas, state official salary, an act relating to state elected official salaries.
House Bill 96 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. The next House Bill 105.
House Bill 105, sponsored by Representative Hallinan, severance tax reduction, coal, an act relating to taxation and revenue.
House Bill 105 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next bill, House Bill 131.
House Bill 131, sponsored by Representative Burkhart, nuclear power generation and storage amendments, an act relating to environmental quality.
Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. We have three amendments. Did you see how I did that? Okay. So we have amendments. First one up, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, would you come to the dais, please? We have three amendments on House Bill 131. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's queue up and be ready to go.
Okay, so the First Amendment is then Representative Provenza. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move House Bill, or the sponsor for, I'm sorry, it's a long morning. I move second reading amendment number 1 for your favorable consideration. Folks, what this does is requires that before a facility could be approved, that we have a permanent storage solution in place or a long-term storage solution in place. The reason behind that is because we've seen other places where a storage facility isn't available and it stalls production or it stalls the ability to get any, to continue doing nuclear work. And it's also important because we've seen in previous, even more recent nuclear reactor sites that there are issues with that storage. And so it's important to ensure that we have adequate storage, that it passes the necessary thresholds before we move in a project that is slated to cost billions of dollars, which oftentimes also ends up costing much more than projected. So I think it's important that we put this in place to ensure that we're also protecting the people of that area. And I would ask for your aye vote.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the body, there is nowhere on earth that there is a permanent repository for nuclear waste. There is nowhere on this world that you can put this where you could permanently deposit nuclear waste. In Finland, they're trying to, I don't know if I should have said that. There's one place in Europe where they're trying to build one right now. They've been working for a number of years. When I graduated from high school in 1978, they announced a permanent repository that was going to be built in the southern United States. It was started 25 years later, and $15 billion later, they gave up. They found, and I followed that very closely through my engineering career. At one time, I thought I wanted to go down there and work on building that repository. They found some hydrological details that they were concerned about. They also found that it was an ancient volcano in that area that they were concerned about that might be reactivated sometime in the next millennia. So they halted progression on that permanent repository here in the United States. So 45 years later, we have nothing here in the United States. If we pass this amendment, it effectively kills this bill because there's nothing planned for a permanent repository, nothing being permitted at this time. The solution throughout the world, not only in the United States, but all of these nuclear facilities is they are storing on site. They are encapsulating and storing that on site. That is the plan of this advanced nuclear facility that they will hopefully build in southwest Wyoming. As I mentioned earlier, a survey was conducted in the communities around this area, and 85% of the people support the construction. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not ignorant. They know what the dangers are. They've read all the newspaper articles, the social media about nuclear energy in Wyoming. They've read all of this, but they are still supportive of having that demonstration plant built here in Wyoming. So it comes down, members of this chamber, do we want to support nuclear or not? If we want to kill nuclear energy in Wyoming for the rest of my life, then vote aye to this amendment, because it will effectively kill it. If you want to give it an opportunity to progress, then vote this down. And I ask you to vote this amendment down.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to hopefully try and clarify a little bit of what I heard the previous supporter of the industry say when he says there's no place in the world that can, and I will argue that. I think there are plenty of places in the world that can, but none of the places that are currently permitted or authorized to store nuclear waste. And so because of that dilemma, the intent of, and still with the agency, the federal agency that oversees the nuclear industry, they are actively pursuing facilities or states that are agreeable to being the final depository of these types of byproducts. In a recent trip to the state to the west of us where Wyoming played in a bowl game this last year, I went to that national nuclear site and looked at some nuclear waste being stored there that came back from the eastern part of our country. Probably on a concrete pad about the size of this room in big concrete casts that there is no emission of radioactivity whatsoever. They've learned how to store this nuclear waste, and because we haven't authorized a permanent storage, then it has become the responsibility of the facility generating the waste to store it on site. And this would allow Wyoming to do that if a nuclear generation site was permitted and sited, then they would be authorized and required to keep this nuclear waste on site. As we get ready, I would just encourage, and I think that we can, through the good chairman of transportation who really has facilitated a lot of this discussion on our nuclear energy moving forward. As we move forward with some of this, I hope that you'll maybe work with him and take the opportunity to visit some of these national laboratories and get perhaps a little clearer picture of the hands-on and actual stuff that happens, because I think it'll really give you a level of comfort. I hope, I would encourage you to oppose this amendment, and I think the bill that's been brought forward by the sponsor of this bill have been very thoughtful and is important for us to complete to allow this demonstration project to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask for an aye vote on this amendment. The people of Wyoming do not want the waste to be permanently stored in Wyoming, and that's what this bill does. And it's actually why the bill is needed, because right now state statute says that there needs to be a long-term nuclear repository before this sort of thing is permitted. That's the whole point of why the DEQ feels they can't move forward with the project. So basically, this is restoring where statute is right now. And that's why the folks that want this facility are so hostile to this amendment. Now, you know, the representative from District 18 gave a little bit of the history, but one thing that was missing there was why this failed. There was a plan in Nevada to do this, and it got caught up in 2 presidential elections because the state didn't want it. But it was a multi-decade effort with billions of dollars, and it certainly is a reasonable request to ask this to be resolved before we're going to have this facility, because the way it looks right now, this waste is going to be on site forever. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what is sourcing this, because they said this is the nuclear industry in Wyoming can't survive. Well, first of all, this isn't going to be Wyoming uranium used at this site. It is most likely going to be uranium from Russia. And I'm sure you've seen the news. We should not be lifting up Russia. And that's what, the way this facility is going, that's what's going to site the fuel for this facility. There's only one other place in the world that is trying to scale up to do the HALE-U for this sort of facility, and it's very unlikely. I mean, they might get up there and say it's very unlikely that is going to happen. It's going to be Russia that is siting the uranium for this facility. Russia. So anyway, we're going to talk more about this as the amendments go on, but this one, let's keep it to this one, which is that we should have a long-term facility in place for the nuclear storage before this happens in the state of Wyoming. That's the way state statute is now. And, you know, I read an article where they went down to Kemmerer to look at this, and they couldn't find anybody that was super enthusiastic about this. I know they say there's a poll, but a lot of times they'll have meetings and they're kind of self-selecting. But we need if we're going to cite polling, we need a scientific poll from a non-biased observer. And we haven't gotten that. In the meantime, though, all I've heard is people raising questions about this. This is a reasonable ask, which is currently in state statute. And we can't just have a walking giveaway in this bill. There has to be some understanding of the requirements in order to have this sort of facility in our beautiful state. So I ask you to vote aye on this. Thank you.
Any other members for the first time? Any members for the first time? Chairman Burkhart?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So on and against this amendment for a number of reasons. One is it confuses the issue. It confuses the issue of nuclear power versus commercial waste storage. If you read the statutes, 1511, Article 15, was originally written in 1997 to address waste storage on a commercial basis. There's one small section in there that refers to nuclear reactors. Now, I could have gone in and just repealed all of Article 15, which I didn't believe was the right thing to do, because it controls waste storage on a commercial basis. Without that portion, a company could come in and set up a waste storage facility with no control. So left that in. However, in 2017, our predecessors, for some of us, confused the issue by adding some information on nuclear power plants. This amendment goes back into adding to that confusion. I separated them out. Leave the waste storage alone, talk about reactors. This recombines them. It also causes some preemption issues with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, who feels that they have the exclusive right to license any nuclear power plant or waste storage if you want to get into waste. But the discussion of waste really is just what's called a red herring. It confuses the issue. So, and as for other facilities to produce the uranium, there's a stockpile of uranium yellowcake currently existing in one of the Midwestern states. That most likely will be used. And we can talk about that on one of the subsequent amendments. So on and against the amendment, it just really confuses the thing. Pretty much as one of the previous speakers said, just takes the bill back to nothing. Just reverts to what it was before, which I don't think is the will of this body.
Any other members for the first time? Representative Fortner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to talk in favor of this amendment for the simple reason the refineries is have coal ash. We never guarded against that, line pits and things like that. And heavy metals out of that now has leached down into the aquifers. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for coal. I'm a retired coal miner. But this is the consequences that we're looking at. And to clean up one of these coal ash pits is about $10 billion, 20 years and 2,000 employees. And we got a lot of them in Wyoming. And from what I understand from one of the senators, we assumed that responsibility when they came here. We wasn't like Montana and had those guys sign on to cleaning up their own mess afterwards. So we're on the hook for that. And I just hate to see the same thing happen with nuclear and uranium. Thank you.
Any other members for the first time? Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment, just focus on what this amendment does. I mean, this is what we call in this business is death by amendment. And, Wyoming is, I remember we had the former majority floor leader sat over here. We had a Navy captain over there, and a couple of us, we were the new kids 10, 12 years ago, and we had a committee together, a select committee that worked for a couple of years, modernized all our laws to make Wyoming really a leader in this area. So all this stuff is coming together. It's about jobs. It's about diversification. It's about safety. I mean, it's probably had a couple things obviously in the world, but they weren't American issues really. The worst issues ever happened in America. Nobody was even hurt. And so I just think kind of bring this back. Wyoming is unique where we export 70+% of our power, the kilowatts we generate. Man, we want to keep that going. That's a really important thing. And for this community where this is going to be sited, tremendously important. And so appreciate all the debate, but boy, please encourage you to vote no on this amendment and keep this bill moving forward. Thank you.
Any other members for the first time? Members for the first time? Okay. Any members for their second time? Second time, I see Representative Gray running, jogging. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I was thinking there and almost missed my shot at talking on the issue. This doesn't confuse the issue. And what you're going to see as we go through this over the next 2 days is that anything to try to build some sort of protections on this is going to be called death by amendment, because this bill is a walking giveaway. And this is not the direction that our state should be going. We need to have a responsible relationship on these sorts of projects. And it's a reasonable request. It's actually the way state statute reads right now, to ask for there to be a long-term nuclear waste storage option in our country before we move forward with this sort of facility, which, by the way, is not going to be using Wyoming uranium. It's going to be using most likely uranium from Russia. So it is true. There's only one other site, and we can fix that with an amendment. We can say it shall not use things from Russia, and we'll work on that if it's not true. But we can't just have a walking giveaway in this bill. We have to have the protections, and so let's pass this amendment and keep state statute to where it is right now, which is to have a long-term storage site in place before we move forward with this sort of facility. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things I would like to clear up, and it's really important because we talked about some waste generated from other mines, including coal or other things. Please remember that the waste generated from nuclear power and how it is handled is not even remotely the same as what we do with any other mine. It's put in casks, and the casks are designed to be transported, and in a way that if during the course of transportation up and down the nuclear interstate or on our railways, if they fall off the car, that they will handle that impact without any type of breach. And so it's not piled up, and you won't have the leaching that you would find. Now, in fairness to the conversation, there was a time in my lifetime when in the uranium mining, when we were mining uranium and you had plants around and mills around before it was enriched, that there was that type of waste that was handled, and the nuclear or the federal agency in response to that I think we've cleaned all of those up now, one which was in my county. That, however, for the enriched uranium that would be used by these facilities is not stored in the same way, is not deposited in the same way. Now, I just commented that I thought that most of the uranium mining waste was cleaned up. I may have that wrong. I get these things from that agency, and if I'm wrong, I'll step back and say I think most of it then is cleaned up. But then when we have a conversation about needing long-term storage, that is on site. That's long-term storage. When they receive the siting and the permitting, they then have to construct and have in place the space and the capacity to store long-term any waste generated from the use of nuclear fuel rods on that site. Now, we can certainly have a discussion if we want to resolve that long-term storage for the nation. I think we could have that in this body. about where we do that, and maybe would that be in our state? That might be something that we would consider. And but if not, then know that it's stored on site with those facilities. There was some conversation, and I appreciate that in the statement was accurate, that the chances that this enriched product would come from Wyoming is very remote, because nuclear production in the United States has dwindled significantly. And we do not, in our enrichment capacity, is not there. And so if you're a utility looking for fuel, whether it be PRB coal or if it's enriched uranium, you look on the market and see where that's at. And most of that market is not in the US at this time. And so that comment is right. I don't know how you can tell a utility or a private market that, where and what they have to buy. If we got to buy Wyoming uranium, then it's going to have to be enriched someplace. And that's a little more complex conversation. It's nice. It's a great conversation, and it's something to look forward to. But in the immediate near future, it's not. So again, I would encourage you to defeat this amendment, support the bill. It's important for these projects that are moving forward.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Members of the body, I don't want to belabor this, but I just want to point out one thing. Many here may believe that there's a tremendous amount of waste that a nuclear facility generates. This advanced nuclear facility will generate a third less than what a normal one does. But in addition to that, if you take all of the nuclear waste that's been produced in the United States over the past 70 years, from all of the nuclear plants that have been in operation, if you brought it all into one spot, it's less than the size of a football field. That's the entire United States over the past 70 years. So some may believe this is going to fill up a landfill or anything like that. It's not. It's pretty small amount if it can all be stored in the size of a football field. So just wanted to point that out. I urge you to vote no on this amendment. Let's let this go forward. Let's be business friendly. Let's be energy friendly, and let's give it an opportunity to develop here in Wyoming. Thank you.
Any other members for second time? Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the body to resist this amendment again. It really changes the bill. In effect, it kills the bill. I think all of you realize that. We could have done other things when we wrote this, but we didn't. Again, protect the people, protect the industry, foster the jobs that this state needs. Now, a lot of people don't want this. I know that, but a lot more do. I think all of us got a copy of the study done by the good university over the hill. 80% of the people in the state go along with this development. So I would say continue. The waste issue is a separate issue. We can have that discussion another time, but we don't need to link them and that. One thing, just to correct information, there are other facilities in the United States that are producing fuel. Quite a few actually, and that they're working through the licensing processes and that, and they'll be producing their own. So again, on against the amendment.
Okay, any other members for their second time? Okay, second time to the sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the good conversation we're having. It sounds like there's some interesting points about this bill that maybe need further discussion. It's certainly not my intention to kill the bill. My intention is to do what's best for the safety and welfare of the people of Wyoming. If this is a death by amendment, which I guess if we don't believe we can develop storage options, long-term storage options, then we should probably kill the bill, because the consequences of not having something safer put in place or something more long-term means that there's a possibility for some of this waste to then impact the people in that community and maybe far beyond. It seems that maybe we need to think more about what the consequences are, because I haven't heard a lot of conversation on that, if we do have issues with storage and leaks. So we've seen evidence from other places, and I'm happy to talk more about that information with any of you later. But we need to be smart about how we do this. We don't want to just jump forward and have no solution for how we're going to have long-term storage. Because right now there's no plan B. We have to have this on site. And so we need to also ensure that we can do that safely and effectively. So I would ask for your support on this amendment. Thanks.
Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 131. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The amendment is not adopted. Next item for our consideration is amendment number 2 to House Bill 131. Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the vivacious conversation around this issue. So let's see, I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 131 and ask for your favorable consideration. A few reasons why I'm bringing this back to you for consideration. Currently, the bill reads, no tax shall be imposed on any advanced nuclear reactor operating in the state. This amendment would insert a sunset through July 1, 2037. So right now, as the bill is worded, it is a broad blank check that goes on indefinitely for this one industry. 2, somewhere in the process of drafting this bill, the tax exemption was changed from test and demonstration sites to any advanced nuclear reactor. And I'm not sure that this broader interpretation is what was intended or what the body intends. And again, this amendment creates a sunset for the tax exemption for electricity generated by an advanced nuclear reactor on or after July 1, 2037. You'll notice that I added a few years to give those who are on the fence some wiggle room. New projects will have 15 years to get up and running before this exemption goes away. Without this amendment, we are denying ourselves the opportunity to evaluate the economic impact of this expansion, of this exemption. If it is working, if it's creating good paying jobs for Wyomingites and contributing to the diversification of our economy, then great, we can extend it. But if this incentive is not doing its job, this amendment provides us with an exit strategy. Thank you for your consideration.
Any other members for first time? Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things on and against the amendment. The amendment really just pushes out the dates. We rejected those on committee of the whole. I would ask you to reject them now because we've already had this discussion. Do we need to look at the taxes we put on the energy industry? Absolutely. And I would challenge anyone in here to tell me where the $5 tax on electricity generated from a nuclear power plant comes from. I won't ask for a show of hands. You know where it comes from? The back of an envelope. That's how that tax was developed. There's no basis in our tax structure on it. We need to look at all of those taxes. We don't have a tax on solar. We don't have a tax on hydrogen. We don't have a tax on a lot of things. And it needs to be a unified approach. I'm willing to look at it. But we can't commit this body, the state, to something that's 15 years in the future. Predict 15 days from now. 15 years in the future, that's an awful long way out there. So I would ask you to resist this, just stay the course. And we need to go and look for those taxes that really we have a basis in how we develop them, not just pulling them off of an envelope. On and against.
Any other members for the first time? Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'm in favor of this amendment. Friends, I've served on your committee number 3, the committee that's charged with looking at our revenue sources and what to do about them. And one of the things that we have done over the years is looked at the pages and pages and pages in our green books regarding exemptions. And one of the things that we've come to the conclusion of is that we have far too many of them and that we need to do something about them. I've even had a bill where I've gotten rid of those pages in the green books, okay? But we've decided that we want to be a little bit more nuanced about it. And one of the things that we talked about that this amendment gets to is that, exemptions for economic development make sense, but not in perpetuity, not in perpetuity. We need to get businesses here. We want them to start up. We want them to hire our people. We want them to be successful. And we want to incentivize them to do it. But we need to change our tax structure, right? The extractive industries have been paying our bills for far too long. We need other industries to be doing the same. So all this amendment does is say, yes, we want you to come here. We're going to give you a tax break for 15 years. 15 years, but then you pay your fair share. On and in favor.
Representative Yan.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, thank you. So 15 years. I think, when this tax originally passed a couple of years ago, my preference wasn't to do it on a per kilowatt basis. I think the way that this tax is structured is kind of weird. I think personally it should be done on a revenue basis. However, I think the way that this is structured, this forces the conversation. This forces us to have that conversation on, if we have a successful plant in 15 years, how do we have that tax structure on energy? What does that look like? What do we want to do? And so I am in favor of the amendment. I think we do need to have that conversation. I think the idea of just having them have no tax at all is not really the right policy approach. This at least incentivizes the development and forces us to have that conversation at least within 15 years. So on and in favor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First for a second.
Any other members for the first time? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do agree with the Chairman of Transportation's comments that we need to look at our tax structure. I happen to disagree with the minority floor leader about the number of exemptions we give and how we should do those, but I do agree that the point is on this tax, it can't be forever, and I think we need to look at this in the interim. I want to share with you all some testimony that I heard during our committee meeting on this. We were told by the company that is developing this plant that they don't need this bill changed right this second. We have some time to do this and do it right. So on and for the amendment and against the bill.
Any other members for their first time? First time? Okay. Members for their second time? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, I think this amendment is pretty hands-off, pretty low-key to say that the exemption is going to turn off in 2037. I mean, we have to ask ourselves, the federal government is paying for half of this. It's a 50% cost share. So you're going to have two individuals that are bankrolling this who have lobbied for 50% of this to be paid by the federal government. It's not a tax credit, it's a grant. And now they want to come to us and tell us that they want a tax break from the state. I mean, to me, the answer should be totally no on that. And I'm a low tax guy. But I mean, to have organizations lobbying like they already have at the federal level to make a pretty penny off the tax code is not appropriate. And this amendment is really low key. All it says is it's going to turn off in 2037 on a project that the federal government, the federal taxpayers are already paying half of it. So let's vote this amendment and turn off the exemption in 2037. Thank you.
Any other members for second time? Second time?
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple things. Nobody came to the state and lobbied for what's in this bill. This bill was put together looking at what issues the companies have to deal with. And if someone wants to put their own money up and build a company, so be it. You know, and other companies have gotten tax breaks over the years. Most people don't realize in the early 1900s, the oil industry was given tremendous tax breaks to get it going. So if you want to argue that, that's part of the history there. But again, you know, we need to be consistent. Companies want consistency. They want to know what the future looks like. And to start putting things out there that, yeah, in the future, we're going to increase your taxes is really just anti-business. So on and against the amendment.
Any other members for the second time before the sponsor? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just comment that anyone who knows me knows that I am very much pro-business. But the question I will pose to you is, what is the point of diversifying our economy if those new industries don't contribute to our tax base? So until we have a broad-based, unified approach to how we tax energy, we need the sunset as an exit strategy. Thank you.
Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 131. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? No. The amendment is not adopted. Division being called for. All those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. And I'm opposed, Wendy. The amendment is not adopted, 28 to 28, with the chair casting the deciding vote. Next order of business is third reading amendment number 3, or excuse me, second reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 131. And Representative Gray is prepared to present this to us, keeping us from lunch. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move second reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 131. What this amendment does is it clarifies that that this would be Wyoming uranium to the extent possible. Okay, and they're going to say, well, you can't know, blah, blah, blah. It says to the extent possible. So it has a little wiggle room. But we're hearing that we're going to give this tax exemption and have this giveaway bill, and it's going to be Wyoming that's benefiting, but it's not going to be Wyoming uranium at this site. And I really do want a specific answer from somebody. Is this definitely not going to be Russian uranium at this site? Because we need to clarify that in this bill, and I want a specific answer to that. Please answer me that question. So look, we're going to continue to discuss in this bill where the uranium's coming from. This approach is to say that it's going to be Wyoming uranium. We're hearing this is going to be a huge boon for our state, so let's make sure that it's going to be Wyoming uranium. And I do want an answer to whether there is not going to be a scintilla of Russian uranium at this site. Thank you.
Any members for the first time? Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frankly, I would not characterize the intent, the purpose of this legislation, I think is so much potential positive for Wyoming. If you think about our energy needs, those are known and unknown going into the future. And all the vast natural resources that our state is blessed with. This makes sense. I wouldn't want to get in the way of it. I urge your support.
Any other members for the first time? Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Members, I'm not going to profess that I know very much how to formulate uranium into nuclear rods. But if you came to me and said that a refinery, if you came to me and said that we had to burn Wyoming crude oil in our vehicles here in Wyoming, we couldn't use any other crude oil, I'd be obsessed with that. That is ridiculous. Many of these refineries are built around a specific crude, and you just can't take crude oil from one refinery and dump it into another and expect it to work very efficiently. So what they do is they blend the crudes together so that it doesn't have wild swing. And I don't know if they do that with uranium, but I could imagine that they probably would try to blend various different uraniums together so they have a more consistent supply. Now, we've heard of the term picking winners and losers very often in this chamber. Are we going to pick winners and losers, or are we going to let the market prevail? This great nation was built upon free market. And the reason we don't have those facilities here in Wyoming is because we don't have the market for that right now. No one's going to invest millions of dollars to build such a plant here in Wyoming because we have no nuclear facilities here in Wyoming. Let the market prevail. If this industry develops, then the market will create those kind of processing plants. But we cannot require this early on for a demonstration plant. And through this legislation, we shouldn't be trying to impose a tariff on Russia. That's not for Wyoming to do. Let the market play out. Let the market forces decide where this is coming from. I urge you to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on and against the amendment as it's drafted, one of the key factors here that a word was left out in this amendment on line 6. It says the bringer of the amendment failed to mention the word "to the maximum extent." And he mentioned extent, but not maximum. So to an answer, I am basically in my career pretty much a fairly good dishwasher. So I'm not a nuclear scientist or an engineer, and would not profess to know the assay that is required. But I have attended a lot of meetings trying to garner information on this industry. And from what I've heard, I don't know if our yellow cake actually is of the quality needed. But I am hopeful that as time goes on, it is. The other issue is really not with the yellow cake, it's with the enrichment process. And currently, I can pretty well answer that question. The only site that I am knowledgeable that is available to enrich, I believe is in Russia for this type. And I may be wrong on that. There is a site in the United States, but it is no longer controlled by the federal government as it once was. It's with a private company. And what I've been told is that it can enrich, but it's currently not economically feasible. My hope is that that creates another industry for Wyoming, is the enrichment process. And I'm against the amendment, for the bill. And I agree with a previous speaker that talked about winners and losers. And let's move this forward. And it is a good industry for our state.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't know, I'm not a nuclear physicist and I don't know all the ins and outs of this aspect, but I want you to think a little bit about the issue here in the free markets. I'm a free market guy. I don't want the government telling us who's the winners and who's the losers. But free markets work among free people. They don't work so well for people that we're turning around and putting our money, hard-earned money, into people who are not supportive of free markets. And they are not supportive of free people. So if we look at this issue here, I mean, I've heard some statement about maybe blending. Well, probably this uranium came from here in the first place. I don't know why you'd need to blend it since it came here first. And there are issues about how it goes halfway around the world and gets processed, and we need to provide free markets to a people that somehow, I'm pretty sure if we look in the news today, they're not exactly supporting free markets, and they're not supporting free people. And so that becomes a question for us. There's a moral question here. How much do we want to support people who do not support free markets or free people? On and in favor of the amendment.
Representative Larson.
I think I just want to understand that the concern is that the ownership of the uranium, if the ownership of the uranium is Russian, so we're saying we're not using any Russian uranium because they own some of the uranium production in Wyoming. And so are we saying that we can't use uranium from Wyoming that are owned by a Russian interest is kind of the question that I'm asking, or did it need to originate on that soil there? So in the center part of the state where they have an office, this company that does in situ mining for uranium, that's a Russian entity, would be producing uranium that we are then saying could not be allowed to be used. So I just want to understand that correctly.
Representative Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't claim to be an expert in this field, but one thing I do know is that we are years away from buying any yellow cake for this project. Years and years. And who knows what the geopolitical world's going to look like by the time we're ready to buy uranium. Why would we put this limitation on now? Down the road, future legislature can sure look at it, but I don't see any purpose being served by adding this restriction today when we are this far out from purchasing the uranium products to actually make this thing a go.
Representative Clausen for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. So in my district, I have a power plant that made the top 5 list for this one of these projects, and we have the largest uranium mine in the lower 48. So what percentage of domestic demand is taken care of by domestic production right now? 2%. 2%. So why? It's cost. Price takes care of it. Why? Why is the imported price cheaper? They don't reclaim where they mine uranium in other countries. And I think we should take that into consideration, especially the way world events are at this particular moment in time. So on and for the amendment.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, thanks. I'm against the amendment. I was down visiting with the Uranium Association at the national level, and they did comment that currently the enriched uranium that is needed is probably only available in Russia. But they also said that they are working with our military to, to find a source. So I sure hope we don't tie our hands and vote this amendment down.
Any other members for the first time? Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. You know, the chair recognized me and I came right up, but I could have told you I'll be there as soon as possible and then gone for coffee. Kind of the same thing as maximum extent possible. You just make up whatever that is. I've done it. We all do it to the lobbyists out here. Can I see you? No, it's not possible. So the other thing with that is the amount of Wyoming uranium. Nobody has said where they're currently going to get the fuel for the power plant, and they don't know. I've had that discussion with them. The laboratory to the west of us is currently in the process of reprocessing fuel and creating new fuel. Now, when you take something and you've moved it a couple times and mixed it several times, now you can't tell where it's from. They can't tell if it's out of a naval reactor or out of a power plant in a western state or an eastern state. They just refine it, reprocess it into fuel. There are numerous companies out there right now. Let's see, 2 in the eastern part of the state, 1 in a southwest state that are currently in the process of being licensed to produce enriched fuel. There's a plant in the Midwest that does the enrichment processing. They brought that plant up they're bringing it back up. It was mothballed. There is a company that does a lot of the enrichment. They're looking at Wyoming because the uranium is here. And when they stockpile it based on the percentage of uranium in the yellow cake, not where it comes from, because they have to blend it depending on what's needed. So where it comes from, who knows? It's the same as our oil and gas. If you said, I'm only going to burn Wyoming oil in my car, someone else previously said, no idea. I know that the refinery near me produces about 40% of the gasoline and diesel fuel in Wyoming. Can you tell me where it comes from? I do know, by the way, and it isn't all from the United States. So it's a world market. And the mention of a uranium company here, I believe that company is defunct right now and is pulled out of Wyoming. There's another one from another foreign country that's supposedly our ally. So if you have a company from a foreign country producing uranium in Wyoming, does it make it Wyoming uranium? Does it make that foreign country's product, or who? Plus, there's a company out there right now buying up every bit of uranium yellow cake that they can get worldwide. You can invest in them if you want. They're on the stock market if you like that sort of thing, because they're hedging their bets against the future, which they'll be able to produce the material for these power plants. So on and against the amendment, I don't think it's really needed, and I think it really doesn't do what it appears to do.
Any other members for the first time? Oh, good. We have more. Okay, this go with
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I
Representative
thought I'd take a little
Martinez in
different
the back.
angle on this.
Oh, I did not, Jim. I recognize the representative from Cheyenne.
I apologize.
Were you stepping off? Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't looking around. I am going to take a little different angle on this. I'm against the amendment and for the bill. I think that nuclear power is going to be a really important part of Wyoming's energy future, but also the world's energy future. I think maybe not everyone agrees that nuclear energy is a real positive thing for climate change. And that's sort of an immediate timeline. And I think we haven't developed our uranium as much as we have here because there hasn't really been a market for it recently. And I think when we start to develop some of these smaller and newer advanced nuclear technologies, that the free market will step up and we will have our own yellow cake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Roscoe. Yeah, Representative Romero Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the country to the north of us. We have the country that's in the South China Sea, one of the breakaway states from the Soviet bloc in Central Asia, another one just to the southeast of them that also provide uranium to U.S. contractors. We just saw how close the last amendment came. I'd say support this amendment. If there needs to be changes, change it next time. We do that all the time. Support this amendment.
Any other members for the first time? Surely there has to be. Okay, moving on. Any members for their second time? Members, let's go Representative Jennings or you? Okay, we'll go Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd urge an aye for this, again, from the standpoint that this won't happen for years. And it's not, maybe it's not today. And there's going to be a lot of legislatures between now and then. But we can send a message today. And we have a world that's watching. This is kind of an important bill, and they're watching what we do. And I think it's important for us. This doesn't kill the bill. It just says we want Wyoming's product to be used as much as possible. We all vote for those bills that want to give preferences or exemptions or things of that nature. And here's one that says today we can say something against people who apparently don't care about free markets or they don't care about free people. And I think people are watching us out there today. And I don't think this goes too far. Future legislators may sit in these seats and they may say, you know what, we don't care where this comes from. But today, you look around the world and you see what's happening in the world. There are people that we're talking about sending money to from this country who do not care about freedoms. They'll step on them and they'll squash them. And I think it behooves us to think about that, about the moral aspect of what we're saying in this. If we vote against this bill, we're saying let's send money to people who are willing to trample on rights and who are willing to trample on free markets. It's easy for us to say we're all in favor of free markets, and hopefully all of us are. I bet there's people about halfway around the world who would love to continue on having free markets or to enjoy their freedoms. So I'd tell you there's a moral aspect to this on a higher plane than whether or not we put this in this particular amendment and we put this onto this bill. It doesn't kill the bill. It does make a statement to a watching world on in favor of this amendment.
Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's what I also wanted to bring up in a little bit of clarity. I don't think anybody in this body today in particular and over the last week is in favor of Russia doing the enrichment. And of course, we're not trying to send anything their way. And I am hoping the discussion leads us to a point where the enrichment and the yellow cake can happen in the United States and in Converse County, and the enrichment plant possibly someplace in the state. No one's saying we want to support Russia in any manner. The fact remains, for the bill, against this amendment, please vote no on the amendment.
Any other members for the second time before the sponsor? Representative Gray.
Mr. Chairman. So let's start with what the amendment does. It says, and let me read the first sentence, the operator of each advanced nuclear reactor shall source to the maximum extent possible its high SAE, low enriched uranium fuel from uranium mines located within Wyoming. So this is about mines within Wyoming. And it says to the maximum extent possible, because when I brought a version of this amendment that had that out of there in committee, the same people opposing this amendment saying, well, this can't be followed now, opposed the last amendment in committee saying that, well, that's not reasonable. So I put to the maximum extent possible to try to be reasonable. And, you know, again, now the same folks are saying, well, this is not the way to go. So at some point, though, we have to build legislation that helps our state. And in answer to the question from the member from District 36 and a couple other members that spoke on this, the reason to do this is because the federal government wants this. They've been lobbied hard. They want this. And if we put this in this bill, they are going to make sure that they get an enrichment facility that is sourced from Wyoming uranium. They're going to make sure that happens. And we'll keep working on the Russian issue as this bill goes through to fix that issue. And this is the legislature of the state of the Wyoming telling the federal government, enough. You're putting half of the money into this with grants of federal taxpayers, and we want to make sure this is going to be domestic uranium. It is not going to be it is not going to be Russian uranium, and it's going to be Wyoming uranium. That's what this amendment does. And they're going to make sure that happens. And it is on this body to make that decision. It's a negotiation in a way, but they want this. They've made this very clear. And if we put the stipulation in there, it'll get done. Now, look, I was accused of trying to pick winners and losers, and I'll tell you, I'm picking Wyoming as a winner and Russia as a loser, guilty as charged, and I'll do that any day. And if they put that on my gravestone, that'll be wonderful, okay? Wyoming, winner, Russia, loser. Vote aye on this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 131. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The amendment is not adopted. Division having been called, all those in favor, please rise. All those opposed, please rise. The amendment is not adopted, 28-30. House Bill 131 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
privilege of the floor.
Representative Larson,
Privilege of the floor, if I may.
you may.
So folks, I'd like to introduce our doctor of the day who hails from my part of the world, drove down here on good roads, navigated our county through the COVID pandemic and is an incredible physician. Dr. Brian Gee is here with us. I'd like to stand and welcome him and thank him for all he's done.
Next bill on second reading, 136. Reading clerk.
House Bill 136, sponsored by Representative Eklund, underground water contested case hearings, an act relating to underground water.
House Bill 136 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Committee announcements. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions will meet in 5 minutes in EO5 to hear the following 3 bills: Senate File 75, deferred annuities; Senate File 49, repeal of state boards and commissions; and Senate File 74, water and sewer districts.
Thank you. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, education, will meet in 15 minutes in extension room 3 to consider one bill, Senate File 31, K3 reading assessment.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriation will meet in 10 minutes to review Senate File 1, and we'll meet tomorrow on adjournment, March 1st, for Senate File 48, 73, and 112, and any re-referrals.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Any other announcements? So members, we still have some second reading to go through when we return from our noon recess. And then we have third reading with a number of bills on consent. So if you have amendments, you're planning amendments, please get them in so they can be removed from consent and we can have that ready. And then we'll have some bills on third reading regular list. A note to the floor: tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we're going to have a floor ceremony honoring and remembering Riley McCullum, the Wyoming Marine who lost his life in Afghanistan. So tomorrow at 2 o'clock, it's going to be, the House is hosting the Senate and our top elected officials in the Supreme Court, those who can attend. It's not a joint session. This is a House function that the chief clerk and Ms. Landry have been helping me put together. But tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So at 2 o'clock, I'd like everyone in their seats. Desktops cleaned off. I'll remind you again tomorrow morning. Desktops cleaned off as Riley McCullum's father, Jimmy McCullum, will be here. And we're going to take a moment to pause and remember the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice that one of Wyoming's own made very recently. So with that, being no further business before this body, we are in recess until 2 p.m.